Hey y'all, it's Saturday, which means it's time to talk about some college football. Today I want to take a look back at last year's college football playoff games and imagine what they would have looked like with 8 teams instead of 4. I also did a very quick fix of people who really love the bowl situation by adding a 7th bowl game to the equation and rotating it. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the format of this thing. People love bowl games. And I do too. I've always loved bowl games. But for some reason, they still want to keep the bowl games incorporated into this playoff for some reason. And I'm not exactly sure why. Currently, there's 6 bowls in rotation. You have the Rose, the Orange, the Cotton, the Sugar, the Fiesta, and the Peach. They will rotate among themselves who should be a semifinal destination, as well as compete with other locations to be host for the national championship. But with 8 playoff teams, that means there's 7 games. And if there's going to be 7 games and you want a bowl game for every single one, we'll incorporate 7 bowls. Now, of course, you can do this with 6 bowl games if you don't have the national championship be considered a bowl. I would argue you get these 7 bowl games, take away the actual bowl title, and keep them as locations and rotate the 7 locations. But if you want to keep the bowl games in it, that's fine, I guess. I'll do this by adding the Citrus Bowl into the equation and having them rotate between quarterfinal, semifinal, and championship games every year. Now, we can keep rotating and calling them bowl games, but saying a team won the 2016 Fiesta, Rose, and Citrus Bowl, that sounds really stupid. I think we should just get rid of it and keep game locations and rotate them. And you can still have the Rose Bowl parade. Hell, I'll even let you have another Rose Bowl if you want, and keep that as the only game that still gets to be its own thing. So, in real life this past year, the Fiesta was the national championship, and the Cotton and Orange were semifinals, so we'll keep that for a model. This would have made the Rose, Peach, Sugar, and Citrus as semifinal locations. Now, we're going to take, of course, the top 8 in the final college football playoff poll, and we're going to pretend here that there's no politics that would have shifted this poll at all. No, we would never do that. So we're going to pretend that this was completely objective and they didn't think about matchups at all and just placed the top 8 teams exactly where they went, which of course is hogwash and ridiculous. But we're going to take the top 8 poll. So you had Clemson number 1, Alabama number 2, Michigan State number 3, Oklahoma number 4, Iowa number 5, Stanford number 6, Ohio State number 7, and Notre Dame number 8. This would have had Clemson hosting Notre Dame in a rematch, Alabama hosting Ohio State in a rematch from the previous year, Michigan State hosting Stanford, and Oklahoma hosting Iowa. So let's talk about when these games would be played. Obviously, playing them on December 31st on New Year's Eve is a stupid idea, so we're going to move the very first games to January 1st, and it's going to be the Peach and the Sugar, or number 1 Clemson and number 2 Alabama's games. This is yet another reward for being the top 2 teams in the college football playoff poll. Therefore, on Saturday, January 2nd, 2016, you would have had number 3 Michigan State and number 4 Oklahoma's games, which would have been the Citrus and the Rose Bowl. On Saturday, January 9th, a week after these games, you would have had the 2 semifinal games, which of course were the Cotton and the Orange. And the national championship would have taken place a week later on Monday, January 18th, in Arizona. Let's talk about site selections. How they selected which teams play where would be very similar to the way it is right now. They would say, okay, Clemson, you're number 1. Which semifinal destination do you want to play at? Obviously, Clemson is like an hour and a half from Atlanta, so they choose the Peach Bowl. Then they go to number 2, Alabama, and say, hey, where do you guys want to play? Considering the other places are Florida, California, or Louisiana, they pick the Sugar Bowl. Next, they go to number 3, Michigan State, and they say, where do you guys want to play? Now, the other options are either Pasadena or the Citrus Bowl. They do not want to play Stanford in California, so they choose the Citrus Bowl, leaving Oklahoma and Iowa in the Rose Bowl. As far as brackets go, they would look like this. You would have Clemson playing Notre Dame, the winner of that playing Oklahoma-Iowa winner. You would have Michigan State playing Stanford, and the winner playing the Alabama-Ohio State winner. Now, of course, the rest of this is going to be speculation on my part as to who would win, and I'll give a brief reasoning why for each one, but here we go. I think Clemson beats Notre Dame. First off, they're indoors. There's no rain this time. They'll have the home field advantage. Even though Notre Dame travels well, I still think more Tiger fans shows up. And Deshaun Watson was put on such a short leash because of the weather that they did not want to turn the ball over and give Notre Dame any unnecessary field advantage. So Deshaun Watson, I believe, had 84 yards passing in that first game. I mean, he really didn't do anything. And it's not because he's not talented. It's because they didn't want him to do anything and throw an interception or fumble or whatever. So they kept him grounded. I think in a dome, it's totally different. I think they run all over and pass all over Notre Dame, and they win probably by 2 or 3 touchdowns. They were the better team without even really showing anything against Notre Dame in that first game, and they let them come back at the end, which made it look worse for the Tigers. But they dominated 3.5 quarters that game. The winner of this game plays OU Iowa, which I think is Oklahoma, because Baker Mayfield is too good of a quarterback, and that Oklahoma defense was too good. Remember, this is an Iowa team that did not play Michigan, Michigan State, or Ohio State in their undefeated regular season, and they lost to Michigan State on a neutral field. The same Michigan State team that got murdered by Alabama. We saw what Stanford did in the Rose Bowl against Iowa, and coming off of wins against USC and Notre Dame to end their season before the bowl games, I think they would have stomped Michigan State. I don't think it would have even been that close. And that's not really disrespect to Michigan State. It's more of a credit to Stanford and to Christian McCaffrey, because Michigan State and Iowa really battled it out in that Big Ten championship game, and then Stanford and Alabama both blew them away in their bowl game. So I'm picking Stanford here. Sorry, Ohio State. I think Alabama's just more of a complete team than they were a year ago. Remember, they were up 21-6 on Ohio State in 2014 before they came back and beat them with Ezekiel Elliott and all that. I don't quite see that happening as much. They were not as dominant, the Buckeyes weren't, as Alabama was. I don't know, Mississippi, whatever. But Alabama, I think, beats Ohio State to advance. Next, we have the semifinal games, and I think they go down similar how they went down in real life. I think Clemson would choose the Orange Bowl because it's the ACC's home, and it's pretty close to South Carolina. They're certainly not going to play Oklahoma in Dallas. They're not doing that. So they're going to take the Orange Bowl. And of course, we're going to go by the real life results where they beat Oklahoma to advance to the national championship game. I think Alabama in the Cotton Bowl, it is a much, much closer game with Stanford. I do think that Kirby Smart and Nick Saban find a way to kind of isolate McCaffrey as much as possible. Definitely in the rushing game, I think he probably would have opened up some passing for them down the field. And definitely in the return game, I think Alabama would have started kicking out of bounds every single time. I think Alabama avoids the upset to get themselves into the national championship game against Clemson. And I don't think it takes a genius to figure out, minus injuries, that Alabama probably would have won the national championship since they beat Clemson. Although, we've added some extra variables in here. You really don't know. But of course, I'm picking Alabama to have won the whole thing anyway. I think we get to basically the same endpoint. I just didn't respect the Big Ten as much as a lot of other people did this past year. And I think Stanford and Alabama would have taken care of them in the quarterfinals. And I think Alabama would have taken care of Stanford. But it would have been like a touchdown game. It would have been much, much more competitive than that 38-0 blowout we saw in the Cotton Bowl. The funny thing about the BCS is that everyone just crapped on the BCS all the time. Everyone talked about how terrible it was and how useless it was and we needed a playoff. And the funny thing was, most of the time, they got the right 2 teams. They got the 2 teams that we were all like, yeah, okay, they're the best too. There were a couple of exceptions. That's going to be in a video coming up later. But for the most part, they got it right. This is a 14 playoff. I think the only true way to do it is an 18 playoff. But I think they basically got it right here. Now, of course, I would have reseeded these teams. I would not have done it in the exact order they did, but I do think typically these 8 teams were the ones that should have got in. But we'll never know because we don't have an 18 playoff right now. And the reason why I demand an 18 playoff is, which sounds like 18, but I'm saying 8 team, is because what if I was wrong? What if Iowa and Ohio State won the whole damn thing and they played each other in the national championship game? You never know. So you have to give these teams a chance. Obviously, this is how I thought the brackets would break down. Let me know in the comment section what you think about the idea of incorporating a seventh site in Orlando and letting all of them just kind of rotate with each other. Also, what do you think about my bracket? How wrong was I? I'm assuming some of you have some very strong opinions on that. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It's a little rambly because I don't know how to do graphic design, so I can't make a nice, pretty graphic design video for you. So I just had to kind of talk it out. I know it kind of went crazy there for a little while, but thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, again, hit the thumbs up button. You can hit the red subscribe button for more college football videos coming out. As well as don't forget to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Thank you again for watching. Sincerely, I appreciate it. And as always, until next time. Hey y'all, it's Saturday, which means it's time to talk about some college football. Today, I want to take a look back at last year's college football playoff games and imagine what they would have looked like with 8 teams instead of 4. I also did a very quick fix of people who really love the bowl situation by adding a 7th bowl game to the equation and rotating it. So let's get started. First, the Fiesta and the Peach. They will rotate among themselves who should be a semifinal destination, as well as compete with other locations to be host for the national championship. But with 8 playoff teams, that means there's 7 games. And if there's going to be 7 games and you want a bowl game for every single one, we'll incorporate 7 bowls. Now, of course, you can do this with 6 bowl games, final and championship games every year. Now, we can keep rotating and calling them bowl games, but saying a team won the 2016 Fiesta, Rose, and Citrus Bowl, that sounds really stupid. I think we should just get rid of it and keep game locations and rotate them. And you can still have the Rose Bowl parade. Hell, I'll even let you have another Rose Bowl if you want. And keep that. Just, let's talk about the format of this thing. People love bowl games. And I do too. I've always loved bowl games. But for some reason, they still want to keep the bowl games incorporated into this playoff for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why. Currently, there's 6 bowls in rotation. You have the Rose, the Orange, the Cotton, the Sugar. If you don't have the national championship be considered a bowl, I would argue you get these 7 bowl games, take away the actual bowl title, and keep them as locations and rotate the 7 locations. But if you want to keep the bowl games in it, that's fine, I guess. I'll do this by adding the Citrus Bowl into the equation and having them rotate between quarterfinal, semifinal,